I never thought I'd end up talking about this universe, and definitely not about them. And I'm willing to bet you didn't either. The Riddick universe is fascinating. It all started with one little movie called Pitch Black, or Eclipse Mortal as we knew it in Latin America, and then it exploded into this massive, sprawling saga full of stories, factions, and species, or rather, variations of humanity. Because there are no real aliens here, just humans who've diverged across planets, beliefs, genetic tweaks, or, in this case, something supernatural. In this video we're diving deep into one of the most baddest and darkest factions in the whole franchise, the Necromongers. These guys straight up believe life is a mistake and that true existence only begins in death. Their entire mission? Convert all of humanity to Necroism, or purge anyone who says no. The Necromongers trace their origins back to the era of expansion and colonization, when humanity, through the first attempts at interstellar travel, spread out to settle the stars. But one group, known as the Brotherhood of the Austere, a small order of devout believers, held the conviction that other religions had become corrupted by idolatry and rigid dogma, losing their true spiritual essence. Seeking to distance themselves from what they saw as the corrupted and dangerous worlds of mankind, the Austere embarked on a long and arduous journey to colonize a star system far beyond the reach of the rest of humanity. They eventually settled on the remote world of Asylum, where they began to thrive and grow in number. Over time, however, divisions arose within the Brotherhood, especially between the high clergy and the lesser priests. Kovu, a prominent scientist, philosopher, and theologian, began spreading a different doctrine, the belief that more than one god could exist. He even preached that there might be as many gods as there were universes in the infinite expanse of the cosmos. His teachings gave rise to a rival sect within the Brotherhood, prompting the ruling hierarchy of the Austere to see him not as a passionate believer but as a heretic, and a direct threat to their power and influence. Convinced of the severity of his heresy, the Brotherhood arrested Kovu and subjected him to brutal punishments. They burned him with heated coals, lashed him with steel blades, and stimulated his nerve endings to inflict indescribable agony without even touching him. The torture was so prolonged that Kovu eventually lost the ability to feel pain, his nerves became numb, and his mind detached itself from suffering. In a final attempt to break his spirit, the Austere brought his wife and children before him and murdered them in cold blood, hoping to inflict a deeper wound than any physical torment. Eventually, a group of loyal followers managed to free Kovu and recover the bodies of his family, fleeing Asylum aboard a stolen ship. How long they traveled or how far they went is unknown, but legend says that Kovu's grief was so immense that, whenever he gazed upon the stars, they dimmed in sympathy with his sorrow. At last, Kovu and his followers reached a region of space no mortal had ever seen, dark stars, dying galaxies, all circling slowly around an unimaginable center, the threshold. Kovu had searched for a place to bury his family, somewhere far beyond the reach of the Austere. Upon witnessing the colossal forces swirling within that void, he chose instead to commit his family to the breach, granting them eternal peace. He crossed the threshold himself, only to reappear moments later. Yet in those few minutes, Kovu transformed from a broken man without purpose into a prophet illuminated by what he called the Underverse. His family was no longer dead, they had returned, moving with serenity as if nothing had happened. Kovu claimed to have dwelled with them in splendor and peace, immersed in the majestic darkness of the beyond. He returned to the realm of the living with a new mission, to convert or kill every human being in existence. Thus began the reign of the first Lord Marshal, Kovu the Transcended. Having witnessed the beauty of the Underverse firsthand, he taught his disciples that all life outside that realm was nothing more than a spontaneous growth, a misguided accident that must be corrected through a long process of purification. The natural state, he proclaimed, is death, and what comes after. Kovu and his followers did not consider themselves exempt from this error. They believed they too were part of it, but that their duty was to remain alive until the entire human universe was purged. Leading his army of devoted fanatics, Kovu burned the temples of the Austere, reduced their sanctuaries to ashes, and killed or converted anyone who resisted. At the end of his crusade, it is said he stood over the body of the last surviving Austere and whispered, "You keep what you kill." Years later, Koview selected his successor, Oltovn the Builder, the officer who had laid the first and last stones of the necropolis. Shortly after the announcement, both departed toward the threshold. It was a long and perilous journey, lasting months. Some began to doubt whether Koview had truly seen the threshold at all, but eventually, they found it. Oltovn described it as surrounded by massive spatial tides, treacherous to approach, yet of an exotic beauty, hinting at the dark wonders lurking beyond. They waited 4 days until the spatial tides subsided. When the threshold finally opened, Koview ordered all Necromongers, except Oltovn, to turn their backs as they approached. From that moment on, a tradition was established: no Necromonger may gaze upon the open threshold, except for the Lord Marshal. Ships must approach stern first, never head-on. Only Koview and Oltovn stood before the breach. Whatever they spoke of was never recorded. Koview stepped into the Underverse and was never seen again. Determined never to lose the path to the sacred threshold, Oltovn constructed hidden navigation markers to ensure the Necromongers could always find their way back. With the route secured, he began building a stable portal around the threshold, a massive structure capable of withstanding violent spatial tides and opening the breach at will. He appointed his most trusted officer as its guardian. His name was lost to history, remembered only as the Warden of the Underverse, a towering figure nearly 3 meters tall, who, along with his loyal warriors, repelled anyone approaching without permission. Whenever the threshold opened for a Lord Marshal's pilgrimage, the Warden and his legion were required to turn their backs, for no living being could gaze upon the Underverse. During Oltovn's rule, a major doctrinal issue arose: how could reproduction exist in a faith devoted to non-life? The decree was absolute: procreation was forbidden, though sexual acts were not. This, however, meant the faith would die in a single generation unless it gained new converts. Despite vast interstellar distances, the Nequast faith continued to expand, demanding more ships, more resources, and more followers. Oltovn dedicated his final years to creating the greatest fleet in Necromonger history. The enormous manpower required fell to a young commander, Balog, a fierce devotee of Koview. Ruthless in his methods, Balog enslaved, forcibly converted, and utterly destroyed the population of Buraneo 5 to supply the necessary soldiers and materials. Oltovn would not live to see the first ascension, the day the Necromonger fleet rose from Asylum. Instead, he chose his successor and ended his life in ritual suicide at the edge of the threshold, declaring that his hour had arrived. Nafamil rose quickly through the military ranks. This young cartographer laid the foundations of what is now known as the Campaign, the grand design to eradicate all human life from the known universe. Oltovn the Builder had chosen well. Nafamil was the ideal leader for the next era of Nequasm. Instead of leaving the necropolis behind on Asylum, Nafamil ordered the entire structure unearthed and entombed within a colossal vessel known as the Basilica. In this way, the first Necromonger church would travel with the fleet across the stars, guiding the Armada on the day of Ascension. During the brief years of the Third Regime, the Necromonger faith spread widely. The word of Koview the Transcended gained strength, drawing thousands of new converts. This influx of believers brought a profound shift in conversion practices. It was no longer enough to kneel before the Lord Marshal and swear allegiance. True purification was now required. The process of desensitization to pain, common in the modern era of Nequasm, is only a faint echo of Koview's own suffering under the austerities. Just as the Transcended had been pushed beyond agony to enlightenment, new converts underwent rituals where one pain was used to nullify another, proving that physical torment could be the gateway to spiritual bliss. To oversee these rites, the rank of High Purifier was created, charged with guiding penitents toward non-life. Despite these doctrinal advances, cracks began to form within the faith. Internal disputes among officers and the exhaustion of constant campaigns dwindled their numbers. After the enormous resource expenditure of the Second Regime, the fervor of the faith started to waver. Some began to see Nafamil more as a planner than a leader, more strategist than warrior. Oltovn had said Nafamil was the perfect man for the era of Ascension, but circumstances had changed, and the New Age demanded a new kind of master. Nafamil died in a confrontation with Commander Balog, who killed him without apology or remorse. It was the first time a Lord Marshal had been overthrown through violence. The Empire was thrown into debate. Did Baylock have the right to succeed him? In the end, the words of the Transcended prevailed. Baylock justified his act by invoking Koview, "You keep what you kill." With those words, he ascended the throne of the necropolis, and the entire Necromonger Legion bowed before him. From that day forward, succession was recognized by two paths: appointment or assassination. Baylock was the last Lord Marshal born from within Necroism, and the first of the modern lords. Under his rule, planetary subjugation became standard practice. The method that had served him so well on Buranio was applied with relentless precision to countless worlds. Under his command the creed hardened further. Baylock taught that conversion alone was not enough. Those who refused the faith were to be annihilated. "Convert or die forever," he declared, echoing Koview's final words to the last of the austere. Baylock's reign might have achieved unparalleled success, had it not met resistance from the Cartodox, a rival faith that was monotheistic, militarized, and procreative. Both religions expanded into the Nei-born system, and when their paths crossed the worlds there became a sacred battlefield. Some oral chronicles claim the elementals advised the Cartodox during the war, though many doubt this, pointing to the elementals' reputed neutrality. The Cartodox wielded strange, advanced weaponry, often superior to Necromonger arms. Casualties spiked on both sides. Officers complained of insecure communications, allowing the Cartodox to anticipate maneuvers. Commanders urged Baylock to withdraw, regroup, and bolster the fleet by conquering other worlds before returning stronger. Baylock refused. "They can count on their god, we answer to many," he is said to have proclaimed. "Everything begins and ends in this system." During the conflict, a technical officer named Kryll oversaw an emergent order within the movement, the Order of the Quasided. These ascetics starved themselves nearly to death, slowing bodily functions until they hovered on the edge between life and death. Fragile yet potent, they focused every resource on mental capability. Kryll offered Baylock the Quasided as telepathic conduits, organic relays that could connect ships without interceptable signals. The experiment succeeded immediately. At last the Necromonger Armada had an incorruptible spiritual communications network. Each command ship hosted one, and the practice endures to this day. With this advantage, the war began to tilt back toward Necroism. Then the unexpected happened. Baylock died in a landing accident on Nei-born Prime. Questions outnumbered answers. Who would lead now? Would commanders appoint a new Lord Marshal, or would they tear each other apart while the Cartodox still drew breath? Baylock's body was carried to the threshold. The Warden, faithful to his oath, transported him in an open arc toward the Underverse. As the corpse faded into the void, the Warden later told the Council, "I saw him move, and I heard his voice." With his last words, Baylock named his successor, Kryll. The Cartodox were defeated. Their false icons were burned, their ranks purified and assimilated. Though many had predicted the devout Cartodox would never convert, most did so with surprising swiftness. Some became respected Necromonger warriors. Many records preserve their stories. Perhaps as a gesture of gratitude, Kryll defied the Necromonger ban on personal icons and raised an imposing statue of Baylock the Brutal set atop the cratered remains of Nei-born Prime as a monument to the battles fought there. This became the first of the great conquest icons that would gain even greater prominence in the following regime. Kryll also ordered statues placed inside the ancient necropolis, images of every Lord Marshal, past and present. Ever vigilant to internal threats, Kryll perfected the Quasided, forming the Order of the Greater Quasided, 5 highly evolved individuals, walking toward death, capable of probing any mind. Their combined power could induce fatal cerebral hemorrhages in resistant subjects. Today, the Greater Quasided serve the will of the reigning Marshal, while the Lesser Quasided handle military and private communications in deep space. Formidable Cartodox weaponry was integrated into Necromonger fleets and ranks, strengthening them as never before. Having already absorbed 2 rival religions, Necroism stood ready to expand to new worlds at unprecedented speed. Kryll's time ended suddenly. Without warning he committed ritual suicide. Fortunately, a trusted officer named Gilor discovered a succession document near his body, and that document prevented the bloody internal struggles that had marked the transition between the 4th and 5th regimes. The succession document named Jilor as the next Lord Marshal, though some questioned its authenticity. Rumors sparked a tribunal, and soon a public debate erupted. Some claimed Jilor had conspired in Kryll's death. He was cleared immediately, and those who pursued these accusations were hunted down and executed ahead of schedule. To safeguard his reputation for posterity, Jilor ordered the succession document that named him Lord Marshal to be locked within the most secure Necromonger vaults under the strictest guard. There it would remain, protected forever. He created numerous icons of conquest, serving not only as memorials of battles fought but also as symbols that signaled the beginning of new campaigns. His offensives across the worlds of the Sarkos system and the Aquilion systems often left nothing behind but these icons of conquest as silent witnesses to the wars waged there. During his reign, he launched a devastating campaign against the Aquilions and ordered the destruction of Greater Aquila through a massive bombardment known as the Final Protocol. He also considered invading Quintessa and coerced Aeron into revealing his future, promising that Quintessa would be his final target. His last act was to order the invasion of Hellion Prime. After converting Kira, Jilor used her to provoke Riddick and then accepted a duel with him. Though Riddick managed to make him bleed, something Jilor claimed hadn't happened in ages, and held his own briefly, Jilor's power proved overwhelming. However, while distracted, Kira stabbed him in the back, injuring and weakening him before he violently hurled her against a pillar. Varko, urged by his ambitious wife, attempted to kill him in his weakened state to claim the title, but Jilor escaped with his speed, only to cross paths with Riddick. Before Jilor could react, Riddick drove a knife through his skull, ending his life and becoming the new Lord Marshal by right of death. Riddick led the Necromongers for 5 years, but he refused to enter the Underverse and did not conquer any new worlds. Eventually, he agreed to relinquish the title of Lord Marshal to Varko in exchange for a way back to his homeworld, Furia. However, Riddick was betrayed by Krona and abandoned on Not Furia. After being named Lord Marshal, Varko led the Armada toward the threshold and crossed into the Underverse, determined to uncover the final destiny of the Faith and claim the power Kovu had promised his people. The Necromongers believe that every universe has its own god, and that life itself is an offense against the natural order of the cosmos they inhabit. That's why they are convinced every living thing has to be wiped from every star so that everyone can be reborn in the blessed Underverse. The Underverse is their promised land, a swirling constellation of dead stars and bottomless nebulae that they worship as their true home and the holiest place in existence. Every Necromonger knows that unless you die according to the mysterious will of your god, in due time, as they put it, your soul will never reach eternal life in the Underverse. Their doctrine boils down to one brutal, simple rule: you keep what you kill. Taking a life in direct combat, or any other way, gives you full rights to everything that person owned, their rank, their destiny. That single phrase is the foundation of their hierarchy, their justice, and their entire view of the universe.
Converts, receiving the mark of the Necromonger.
Necromongers don't reproduce the old-fashioned way. They see procreation as heresy that just spreads more life. That's why they call everyone outside the faith breeders. Every single living Necromonger is a convert, someone ripped from a conquered world and accepted into the fold. During conversion, new believers receive the Necromonger mark, 2 agonizing spikes driven into each side of the neck. The spikes bleach the skin and deaden the nerves. Through that pain they learn how one kind of suffering can cancel another, and how torment can lead to spiritual awakening. That's how they start to grasp the incredible honor of being allowed into the Empire. After the ritual, fresh converts wear scorched, ragged robes, symbols of their old life burned away and their rebirth through the purifying fire of pain. Necromonger troops are terrifying in battle because of their altered physiology and fanatical devotion. Dying in combat is the highest honor. It's the fastest ticket to the Underverse. Even the lowest grunt feels no physical pain. The conversion process erased it completely. They fight without fear, without mercy, and without hesitation. Necromonger armor is never cleaned after battle. The scars, burns, and bloodstains are considered blessings and proof of faith. The more beat up and battle-worn the armor, the greater the warrior's prestige. Sure, they carry guns like everyone else in the galaxy, but the faith glorifies close quarters killing. Wielding a blade or axe takes real skill and real faith. Pulling a trigger just doesn't compare. The ideal Necromonger warrior wants to feel the enemy's warm blood on his hands and measure their worth with a single, perfect strike. It is said the comet always precedes them. Abu al-Walid. The Necromonger armada appears like a comet in high orbit before a world's fall. Its flagship is the Basilica, carrying the entombed necropolis and serving as command and spiritual center. Key ship classes and assets: Basilica, command vessel and home of the necropolis. Icons of conquest: towering spires carved in the image of the Lord Marshal, planted on conquered worlds. Frigates, the fleet's backbone, combat and transport workhorses. Necromonger fighter, single pilot interceptors launched in swarms. Sarcophagus glass troop transport, medium ships for deploying warriors to planetary surfaces. Warship, mobile barracks and training platforms for elite forces. If you haven't watched the movies yet, you really should. They are fun, exciting, and it's clear that Vin Diesel truly loves this character. Hopefully, we'll get the next installment soon. The Necromongers are a unique fusion of civilization, subspecies, religion, empire, and fanaticism all wrapped into one. They are fascinating, and they leave you wanting to know more, but this is all the information I was able to gather. If you enjoyed this content, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, share the video, and comment on what other topics you'd like to see on the channel. See you next time.